Okay, thank you very much for joining us today. So we're obviously the Birmingham Architectural Association, and today we're joined by Altro, who are a leading flooring, walls and doors manufacturer, but also one of our key sponsors. And they have put on this event with Bryan. So from the Altro side, we've got Yara Swakowski and Sarah Jennings. Sarah's kind of the West Midlands representative, and Yara's up north in Sheffield and Manchester. And we're here today with Bryan, director Matt Hutton, and also associate and Birmingham office lead Tomasz Romanowicz, who will be talking about their kind of coming to Birmingham a bit more. And their regional work and ambitions for the region. As a collective, they'll kind of introduce their smarter thinking spaces methodology, as well as discuss their unique approach to strategic development from REBA stage 1 to completion, and using the Engineering Heart Space project in Sheffield, and also how collaborating with Altro, they managed to come to the final solution, but they'll kind of explain that a bit more. And I'll, throughout the conversation, feel free to ask questions as we're going through over with the Q&A function or in the comment section. But in general, I'll follow on with sort of upcoming events afterwards. But yeah, do enjoy, and I'll hand you over to Matt. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Marina. Thanks for that great introduction, and well done on pronouncing all the names pretty well, I think. So get the slides to work. Sorry, just go back one. There we go. Right, so our presentation today is essentially an overview of our circular thinking ethos and our smarter thinking space and methodology. I'm going to give a bit of an overview about Bryan, so you learn a bit about us and our approach. Tomasz is going to talk specifically about Birmingham, why we're in Birmingham now. And then, as Marina said, we'll kind of close with a case study on one of our most recent projects for the University of Sheffield, which is the Heart Space project, which Altro very kindly supported us on, and they can tell you about the technical aspects of what was done there. So in terms of the team today, my name's Matt Hutton. I'm a director at Bryan. I've been here now since 2003, I think it was, when I left the Bartlett in London to move up to Sheffield. So that's about 18 years. I work nationally across all the sectors. And my role really is to kind of lead our teams in the north, Sheffield and Birmingham. And alongside me is my colleague, Tomasz. Tomasz, do you want to just explain?
Thanks, Matt. I'm Tomasz Romanowicz, associate at Bryan, based out of the Birmingham office. I'm going to be playing a lead role in our growth within the region, as well as across the business nationally, with a focus on build-to-rent regeneration and commercial. I've been with the practice 3 years. Prior to joining Bryan, I had 10 years of my career in London, both sort of studying and working down there. I've got a particular interest around making the role of the architect more relevant and reflective of the industry that we're in. I spent 2 years leaving architecture in development management, where I got a good understanding of kind of seeing things from a client's perspective. So in one sense, yes, I'm passionate about design and placemaking, but that's underpinned by a knowledge of kind of real estate and the kind of wider development industry that architecture operates in.
Thank you, Tomasz. Thanks for that intro. So just a quick one. Our team then, we've got about 133 staff, maybe more actually now, thinking about it. One of the 51st largest practices in the UK. We've got offices in London, Western, Sheffield and Birmingham, obviously. That's why we're here today. We've been in Birmingham now for the last 5 years, and Tomasz and the team down there are really starting to develop it further. And that's why we thought it was a good time to share with you our thoughts, what we're doing, our approach and where we're heading. In terms of sectors, we work across all sectors nationwide, but our key sectors are education, advanced manufacturing and residential, as Tomasz just mentioned. We kind of believe passionately that the concept design phase and that early strategic phase is incredibly important to setting the project on in the right way. So feeding that kind of design stage, strategic information into that early concept stage, where we really advocate sketches, model making, and not getting straight into the BIM model and working a computer directly. We do have the skills and the teams to do that sort of stuff. So taking a sketch design like we did here to the competition winning design of the Ingenuity Centre at the University of Nottingham. Then we also have the team to then go on and deliver that on site. So we're pretty proud of the work that we do and our process that gets us there. And we've been very lucky over the last few years to win a number of RIBA awards and other awards for off-site manufacturing, things like that in the sector. So it's been a really nice kind of process over the last 15, 20 years to see Bryan develop as we have. So I guess what I wanted to talk a little bit about what our purpose is and what our strategy is and what we call more than design. So what we actually do. And I guess we see our role as architects as being one of assisting and enabling transformation and change. We really want every project to be more successful than the last and more sustainable than the last, and in whatever way that success is measured. So whether that's socially, environmentally, or economically, we're all about kind of improving the world for a better result. And we take every new project as an opportunity to build upon what we've done before. So we constantly change things for the better, based on evidence, based on insight, and obviously an inspiration. And we consider this what we call our kind of more than design process. So what we do is obviously we design beautiful buildings and spaces. However, what we really do is much more than that. We have a digital team under the umbrella banner of Bryan that do a lot of our data management. They do data management for the contractors, consultants, architects, because it's becoming increasingly more important. So we can help define and deliver your data. We perform information manager roles, and we kind of advocate and support an open BIM process. We have landscaping inside now, and that's fully integrated into our design process. That allows us to respond very quickly and efficiently to our clients' needs. The Bryan Living section, which Tomasz is heading up, I'm sure we'll mention later on, are our sort of residential design and delivery team, and they work in tandem with our strategic development team. That's headed up by Tomasz in Birmingham. And that's about finding and facilitating land-led opportunities. And finally, our strategic team work with our clients at what we call kind of REBA stage -1, I guess. And the starting point of that is really part of our circular thinking ethos. So our starting point is the engagement process, or REBA sort of -1, and that's where we engage with our clients to define the brief, capture their aspirations in the project, and we do it against 3 core principles of people, place, and process, which I'll come on to. So our smarter thinking space and methodology, of which I'll show you a worked example through the Heart Space later, begins with us putting our clients' aspirations, their vision, at the center of our design process. And through a series of workshops, questions, and analysis, we then tailor our approach to reflect their kind of bespoke needs. So the people, place, process moniker is something we don't just use to define the design work that we do, but it's also how we structure and manage our projects. The thread of the connects everything of how we think, how we act on projects, including the way we operate as a business. So the next part of that is our Evolve strategy. Evolve is where we then start to measure how the design is evolving and aligning with those objectives and KPIs we set in the engagement process. And we do this cyclically at each RIBA stage to make sure we're hitting all the right notes that the client requires. Beyond that is what we call the evaluate stage, and that's at completion, where we look at post-occupancy evaluation. We actually evaluate how our designs and the building and outcome compare in reality to what we set as those key priorities at the beginning. So we kind of, it's not just about subjective, it's objective-driven data analysis as well. And then finally, the final part of our circular thinking bit is I guess, closing the loop, capturing that feedback and the learning outcomes that we've learned in each project and the culture, and then building that upon our sort of shared experiences and knowledge to improve what we do next time. So that, I guess, is a constant desire of ours to engage, evolve, evaluate, and then enhance within every project at each stage from one job to the next in a continuous loop is where we kind of underpin our what we call circular thinking, but also our kind of pursuit of excellence. So that's a bit of an insight into how we operate and our approach. Before I pass over to Tomasz, I just wanted to share a few projects that we're doing in the region, or have done in the region very recently. The National College for High Speed Rail, we completed about 4 years ago. That was one of our biggest significant projects in Birmingham and was the kind of catalyst for us starting our office there. And more recently, we work, as I said, across multiple sectors. So you can see here a fire station in Coventry, one in Aston. We did a large manufacturing building, advanced manufacturing building for Magna near Coventry. And more recently, we've just completed the degree apprenticeship centre for the University of Warwick. And sticking with Warwick, we have on site at the moment their art centre, which is a large arts and cultural centre, new build and complex kind of refurb, similar to some of the issues we dealt with at Heart Space actually. And finally, we're just working on the Centre for Advanced Temper Technology. Timber technology, sorry. And that kind of ticks a lot of the boxes in terms of what we're aiming for, carbon reduction targets and MMC, big ticket items that we've been pushing on as a practice for some time. So I'm going to let Thomas speak a little bit more now about Birmingham and what we're doing in the region.
Thanks, Matt. And I guess the sort of starting premise is, why are we in Birmingham? And we're mindful that architects come to this city for all different kinds of reasons. And it's important to stress, as kind of Matt touched upon there, we've actually been in the city now for around 5 years already, in addition to undertaking work within the wider region for many years prior to that. But with myself relocating here in January and where we are as a practice and the next chapter of the city, the time is definitely right to lift our presence within the city and be part of that wider conversation. So if we go to the next slide, please, Matt. A big part of our methodology is looking beyond buildings. Cities create synergy. They're a focus for creativity, ideas, commerce, and culture. We're really interested in this at Bryan, and we understand that the buildings, spaces, and places that we create as architects are reflective of this energy of what goes on in a city in a particular point in time. And the images that are picked here very much kind of underpin this narrative in the context of European cities, where historically there's been some really important transitions and shifts in specific locations that have massively influenced where we are now. And you can add others to this, but we picked ancient Athens, Renaissance Florence, 18th century Paris, Industrial Revolution Manchester, and the fall of the wall in early 19th Berlin. So what happened in these cities was a huge influx of what the French call émigrés. So it's an importation of ideas, cultures, people, change, underpinned by a strong existing local presence and condition. And we firmly believe what is going to happen in this city over the next decade, Birmingham will fit into one of these moments. It's as simple as that. And we want to make a really unique contribution to that conversation. If we can go on to the next slide. So for what reasons? We're big fans of what the Renaissance called genius loci, in other words, the spirit of a place. So for example, I've never been in a city with so much potential around brownfield land than Birmingham. My girlfriend and I were living in the Whitmore collection in the heart of the jewellery quarter, and the image to the right is one of the first pictures that I took on one of our first canal walks back in January in the heavy snow. And it's amazing to see this piece of forgotten infrastructure transformed into what is an incredible piece of amenity. It's unlike other cities from a canal perspective, such as Manchester and London that I've seen. It's a prime social space. It's a recreation space. It's sunken below the kind of city level, which has quite a calming measure. And it's very much an oasis of nature and biodiversity. Also, we're interested in things like the post-COVID city and where that's going. And I firmly believe Birmingham can very much kind of lead the way on that. And things like the rebalance of wealth and investment within the UK. Again, Birmingham's strategic position within the UK, from our perspective, makes that a really, really interesting place to kind of practice. So if we move on to the next slide, please, Matt, it's these qualities that really are aligned to our methodology as architects. And what we do, particularly in strategic development, we take more of a proactive approach to projects rather than a reactive approach. And it's this proactive approach which has been epitomized in our residential brand, Bryan Living, which is very much focused on being a facilitator of projects for clients and getting involved much, much earlier on. And it's this proactive approach which we feel gives our role as architects much more influence and relevance in the wider process to tackle the major issues of our time, for example, carbon zero and well-being. And this has been very much kind of reflective of the kind of work that we've been undertaking over the last 3 years. So firstly, starting with MMC and accelerated delivery, this is going to be absolutely massive for Birmingham and the West Midlands region in terms of meeting housing numbers. This is something we're really passionate about and have been involved with for a number of decades now. We recently picked up Offsite Architect of the Year last year in the Offsite Awards for a lot of the work that we're doing in MMC and DFMA. And this is an example of one of our schemes. This is the Kitchener Barracks scheme down in Kent, which we're working with MMC developer Top Hat, delivering out a fully volumetric site over the next 18 months. If we can move on to the next slide, please. We're also really interested in alternative models of housing delivery and the role that architects can play within that process and challenging existing convention. This is Rotherham Town Centre, which we're on site with, and it's one of the host of local authority projects that we're bringing forward the funding, the delivery partners to enable local authorities to unlock their brownfield land and play more of a lead role in housing delivery and set higher benchmarks for things like design quality, placemaking, sustainability, etc. and set that framework for private sector investment that a lot of these places need. We can move on to the next slide, please, Matt. One of my specialisms is build to rent. I've been involved in the sector since its inception into the UK market a number of years ago, and its potential is massive as a tool for regeneration. It will play a key role within the city over the coming years, and it's been really interesting for me to experience the sector both as developer, architect, and now finally a resident at the Whitmore. And this is the Meridian scheme up in Sheffield, where we've just lodged an application for 336 units with Birmingham-based developer Godwin Developments. And on to the next slide, please, Matt. We are picking up projects in Birmingham. This is the Hagley Road Master Plan for Calthorpe Estates. And as Matt touched upon, one of our USPs is we're a landscape architect as well. Landscape projects are so landscape led these days. We believe it's invaluable to have our urban designers, our architects, our landscapes all working holistically as kind of one team from the outset. And then on to the next slide, please, Matt. And then finally, we're massive fans of densification in sustainable locations. And I don't just mean building densification, but identification of landscape, well-being, amenity. And this is one of two projects that we're doing with Berkeley Homes down in London, which epitomizes that narrative. This is the Overstation Development East project, which we're currently on site, which is essentially building over Woolwich Station. So that's it from me. I'm going to hand the floor back to Matt, and I look forward to engaging with any questions at the end of the session. Thank you.
Thank you, Thomas. I hope that was a good introduction to where we are and what we're doing in Birmingham. And hopefully there'll be some Q&A at the end specifically about Birmingham, because I guess that's why we're here. But I thought it was useful to use this opportunity to do a bit of a case study on one of our most recently completed projects for the University of Sheffield, which is the Heartspace project, because it's a good kind of process and project that really explains what we did in terms of smart thinking space, and it delves a bit deeper into how we actually deliver these types of projects. And also there'll be a bit of a CPD element, because Yara and Sarah are going to do a bit of technical information towards the end of it as well. But I'll try and get through this as quickly as I can. So the Heartspace project is part of the Faculty of Engineering at University of Sheffield. This is a big map of the whole of the university campus. The purple section is the engineering campus, which is one of the biggest parts and biggest faculties within the university. So we were approached to do some strategic work, like I said, the sort of Cerebus -1 stuff, to look at the entirety of the St. George's campus, which you can see in this image here. The red line boundary is what became our red line boundary for the Heartspace project, but we were actually looking at a piece of strategic work for the whole of the engineering campus. So just looking at the top of the image there, the three buildings that we were directly affecting were the Sir Frederick Mappin building, which is a sort of building from about 1890. It wraps around the corner on the left-hand side to a small 1938 extension in the caretaker's house that came in later. To the right-hand side, there's a building called the Broad Lane building, which was a 19 sort of late 60s, 70s add-on that came later on, obviously. And the central wing at the base of the image is the oldest building that was there. And we were actually trying to create something that knitted all of these buildings together, and you can imagine all the different level changes and issues we were going to have to deal with there. Internally, some of the spaces in the buildings are absolutely beautiful. The hall, the library space, some of the existing features that we retained, obviously. But overwhelmingly, the building was in a poor state of disrepair, to be quite frank. So when we began our very first look at this, we were just trying to figure out which elements we could retain, which needed to be demolished. And that's all part of our early sort of smart thinking spaces, vision workshops. So there's some images of the site and crucially, I guess, the image of the courtyard space, which is the space the university wanted to convert into usable accommodation. So our strategic team came in, headed up by Steve Maslin, and worked with the university to develop a brief, which was about them becoming the best engineering faculty in the UK. They're one of the top 3 in the world, actually, in terms of engineering faculty. So, perversely, they were working out some of the worst quality accommodation on the campus for the university. And that was something we were going to address. And as part of the methodology I touched on earlier, our smart thinking spaces thing, this was about us getting into a vision workshop and multiple workshops with various stakeholders and various upper echelons of the university to understand what were their key priorities for the project in a sort of people, place and business aspect. So we helped them determine those, and we helped them set strategic policy documents for the vision. We also then, as part of our process, we go in to really understand the detail of the campus. So we went around all the existing buildings to understand the nature of the campus. We do a condition survey looking at which bits, again, we should retain, which we should try and demolish or remove, or where there was opportunities for new builds. We then even go right down to the level of room by room. So we're looking at this space, what it's being used for, but also the utilization of space to see if there's any efficiencies we can drive through the process. Now, through that process, it helps us then identify where the gaps are between what the university have at the moment, but what they want to achieve with the new building. And then we use that sort of future model and that gap analysis targets as part of our circular thinking methodology, where at each RIBA stage, we make sure that we're actually heading in the right direction and we're aiming towards their KPI. Once we've done that, we then did a series of kind of opportunity tests where we had infill projects or projects that may sit within the campus, and they get scored against the future model that we've created. And effectively at the end of that process, so this was back in 2011, I think it was, we were doing this, it was a long time ago. We identified, the red section you can see here are new build projects that were part of a phase master plan. The orange sections were future phases. Any of you that know projects within the university may know that the one on the far right is what became the Pam Liversidge building, which is one that we built and designed. That was a kind of an infill project in the corner that dealt with lots of transitional space, created a new small mini atrium space. But it's really about dealing with the level transitions that existed within the existing building. The one at the top left-hand side at the top of the page is what became the Diamond building, which was designed and delivered by 12 architects. And then the one in the middle is what then became the Heart Space project. So that was identified back in 2010 as part of our strategic work for the Development Master Plan. Key part of our work, and Thomas mentioned it earlier, is even before you put pen to paper, this is about us trying to understand our clients' requirements and drive efficiency into what they need. And we managed to accommodate 108% growth in their student numbers and staff numbers and space requirements, but only in a 60% GIFR increase by the work that we've done. Again, it was improving the capital estate condition from 28%, which was really low, up to 70% in the A and B category, which is now done. And there was a big drive towards energy consumption and carbon reduction. So once we set the development framework in place, the university then did a design competition that we went for, and I led that process. So these are images back from 2012. The new NEB, which is new engineering building on the left-hand side, is what became the Diamond. There was always a thought process that they were going to move all the students out to the NEB, and the staff and the postgraduate students would be located in the Heart Space. The gold line you can see across the bottom, the dotted line, was a future phase of a pedestrian master plan within the city centre called the Gold Route, right away from the train station up towards the university. So we, as part of our analysis, were thinking really we should be making a statement on that Gold Route, because we knew we were going to be demolishing some of the older buildings that were there behind in the courtyard, which was already going to be problematic. There's a lot of kind of the gubbins that make the buildings work, substation, deliveries, everything was in that centrepiece. But we wanted to create an entrance through there. So we looked initially at the 1938 extension and the caretaker's house as an opportunity to demolish and bring a brand new entrance in off the Gold Route. We did that by looking critically at things like heritage impact assessment, working with our heritage and planning consultants at the design competition stage to see whether this would even be possible. So again, all back in 2013. And also part of the drive for that was, this is an image looking on Portobello Street. The left-hand side is Mapping Building. You're looking at the old caretaker's house and the 1938 wing extension. Even if they were retained to build the building, you had a very limited access. You're talking probably less than 6 meters to get all the building materials in through that space. So not only do we want to do that for the sake of creating a new entrance, but it was going to improve the access. It makes ability to construct it much easier, and then it improves that pedestrian experience. So at our first initial sketches, what we're trying to do was create something that really engaged with people at the street level. So you could see into this new Heart Space, you could see the big investment the university have made, lots of transparency, create a bit of congregation space, really showcase the faculty internally. And then thinking about, once you brought them in, then how do you then connect through to the existing buildings that were there and also the future phases beyond that. The Heart Space concept really was born out of an idea that the building itself is a mixture of heavy labs for mechanical electrical engineers and lots of office spaces, cellular office spaces for them as well. what we're trying to do with the heart space is tempt the engineers out of the laboratories, out of their individual office spaces, to come and sit together, socialize, communicate, bounce ideas off each other, have those kind of peer-to-peer conversations that they weren't having as cross-faculty discussions. And I guess the concept really then was, we've got to retain the existing buildings. We know we can't put too much weight on those existing buildings, so we need to drop a roof in there that's going to be quite lightweight, that's going to really kind of celebrate the engineering faculty, the new and the old section. We kind of conceived it as an independent structure that would respect the sort of historical significance of the mapping in the central wing, but then we'd actually need to then insert some contemporary additions, which we thought exposed concrete was the simplest way of doing that. Which could then showcase kind of featured laboratories and spaces within that, and a new cafe social heart space at the ground floor as you come in. So these were the images we produced for the competition way back in 2013 that got us the gig, thankfully. And hopefully you'll see towards the end, it's not too far away from where we were at that stage, but you can see the new insertion there. At that stage, we were planning to demolish all of the buildings towards the Portobello end of the street, knowing that effectively once we got into the planning conversation, that would be unlikely, but it was about creating that kind of impact and that concept. So once we got through the competition phase, it was then a case of thinking, crikey, how do we actually deliver this now? Because it was a great concept and idea, but incredibly difficult process. So we were working with Arabs. We spent a lot of time down in their London office working with their modelers to define kind of the boundary edges of where this roof was going to work. Not just testing visually what it looks like, but obviously physically, can you actually make it stand up? How does it affect the glass, the thermal properties? I learned a hell of a lot about G levels and various levels of specification on the glazing, which I hadn't learned before. So we spent months designing the roof with a specialist company called Wagner Bureau, who were a great work company to work with. So once all that process had been done, we submit the plan application, and this just tries to explain that beyond the heart space, which is a fantastic visual image of what we're doing, a lot of the work and the money and time was spent in the existing building. So we did a complete refurbishment and overhaul of both the mapping building and the central wing, complete infrastructure overhaul, lighting, heating and everything. So that was for both of the larger existing buildings. And then in the middle, obviously, we were about creating a new high quality laboratory spaces for the mechanical electrical engineers, resolving all the accessibility issues between the two buildings and creating the big new open plan heart space. So moving on to construction. We couldn't have done this process without fully integrating our BIM processes and how we work as a business. Remember, this was back in 2014. BIM level 2 was just in its infancy, but as a business, we'd already been working in 3 dimensions and using BIM with ArchiCAD for about 15 years at this stage. So we were well ahead of the curve and still are. So our kind of open BIM processes, which we still promote now, allowed us to work with multiple consultants across multiple different disciplines and various different products as well. So things like Rhinoceros and Grasshopper that they were using to develop the roof with, Tekla, Revit, ArchiCAD, we can kind of use and collaborate with anyone. But this was a really big and important step for us. It wasn't something the university wanted us to do specifically, but we wanted to, as a practice, test how we could make this work on such a large and complex building. And this was just to show you some of the things beyond the typical M&E junctions. What we did is we actually modeled all of our details one-to-one as well in 3 dimensions, because it was a listed building, because the junctions were so complex and difficult to understand. This is just the level of detail that we went to. And I always say, put this in because it's great modeling everything in 3D and having all these BIM models, but nothing is better than going down onto site and actually going and physically seeing these things, how they're put together, measuring them. So we've had reams of photographs of site visits to make sure that we were hitting all the right notes in terms of where these new bits were going to go into the existing building. So once we started the enabling works process, you can see then those existing buildings that were much later additions, sort of 70s, 80s, have now been removed. We're starting to dig out some of the spaces for the basement and how we're going to then slide in some of the new atrium floor spaces in here. Here's some images of the roof of the existing buildings and the state of some of the window sills, and the windows themselves were all completely rotten. So this is a huge part of the process, huge part of the program on site, and cannot be underestimated the amount of time and effort we spent on that, removing every single slate individually and replacing it back once we've re-roofed and re-insulated. We had a specialist consultant on board just to look at all the heritage issues. They did a fantastic job in terms of re-leading the roofs and things like that. So really, really involved. Part of working on a listed building like this with a contractor, and made more difficult in the fact that we did it through a single stage design and build process, was the discovery of things as you start to uncover and open up the existing buildings. So whether that's the ceilings, issues that we had, wall coverings that were falling off, the floors, which Yara and the team will talk about in a moment, we kind of found everything: asbestos, dry and wet rot. There's nothing we didn't find on this project over the 10-year lifestyle. And the images I showed you earlier of the existing buildings and the nicer spaces, I just wanted to contrast that with some of the existing spaces that we found and the level of refurbishment we had to achieve. So these are just some of the internal spaces throughout the building. And there were multiple level changes, mezzanines inserted in, and kind of unnecessary level changes as well that were not required, that we had to remove. We must have had 50, 60 different door types, I think, to look at. Again, you know, in terms of historic impact, there were lots of those that we needed to retain as part of the conservation team's requirement. But yeah, imagine the size of the door schedule in our BIM model was enormous. In terms of the existing M&E, it had all been done piecemeal over time, over many, many years. So it was a real hodgepodge and a bit of a mess that we then had to kind of really try and understand how we were going to do it and how we were going to go back and rejig the M&E design. And then just before I hand over to Yara and Sarah, just to show you the flooring issues that we had, and hence why we got Altro involved and why I got Yara on site immediately, because we must have had 20, 30 different floor substrates that we had to deal with. But I'm pretty sure Yara will be able to explain that a bit better than I will. So I'll hand it over to Yara.
Thanks, Matt. Hi, everyone. My name's Yara. I work for Altro on the specification side of things. You probably won't come across me, mainly because I tend to work with practices in Manchester and Sheffield. It's Sarah who will be your main contact, so you'll get to know her. The reason why this project was a really huge success for us, it's one of many we've been lucky enough to work with on Bryan, was down to their collaborative approach. So since the beginning, as Matt mentioned, 2012, they've always shared the visual with us. Everything, we're involved from very, very early on. As a result, we live and breathe the project as it's evolved, which in this particular example really did save the project from our side of things. So what happened originally when we saw the visuals from concept stage, a different product was specified. We specified, it was actually my colleague Marco, a traditional bonded flooring system, safety floor. What happened as we went to site and we came across, as Matt said, 20 to 30 different substrates, which is normal when you have an Edwardian building, a Victorian building, linking by a new space. We had to rethink the whole specification. What we had specified was no longer going to work. The main issue for us was the damp issues we faced. That's when we sat down with Bryan, with the main contractor, had the conversation, how can we switch without affecting the programme, staying on budget and visually without affecting the university's vision and Bryan's vision. That's when it became apparent the only solution we could have was to go adhesive-free. We went with our Altro expresslay system, which is an adhesive-free flooring that has a built-in damp-proof membrane. I'm going to let Sarah tell you a little bit more about the science, just because if you're not familiar with going adhesive-free, it can be quite new to you. She's got some visuals prepared for you to go through it. Any questions at the end, or if you want more information, just ask Sarah for a sample and I'm sure you'll get to know her. Yeah, I'll pass you on.
Thanks, Yara. So the technology, how does it work? So it was actually introduced over 11 years ago now, after years of development, and it's designed to be installed over new screed and concrete substrates, as well as areas that Yara mentioned with ongoing damp issues and even existing floor finishes. So moisture vapour within a slab will remain immobile until such time as the floor is covered. And once covered, the moisture vapour, which cannot escape through the structural DPM, will push for the surface. As it's now covered with a semi-impervious floor covering, there's no path for it to escape, and it's going to sit under the surface and produce water-filled pockets as well as attacking the adhesive which secures the floor covering. One solution for this could be to look at applying a surface applied damp proof membrane. So that actually allows for a controlled amount of moisture vapor to filter through it, and the level of which is well within the tolerance of products installed above. But how the adhesive-free technology works is the same. So it has a specially formulated underside of Boss, which allows the flooring to sit away from the subfloor, therefore allowing it to breathe. So any moisture remaining within that substrate can dissipate without the need for this surface applied DPM. And this actually speeds up the installation process, as there's no need for the DPM, no need for adhesives, and it means you can return the floor to service a lot quicker. So pretty much as soon as the installation has been completed. And we see up to 50% savings on installation times on projects, and in some cases up to 35% on installation costs. And there's no compromise on the longevity or robustness of the products, as they have the same lifespans and guarantees as their adhered counterparts. And as you can see on the screen here, adhesive-free technology excels in environmental credentials. So with 10% recycled content, and they're 100% recyclable at the end of life, as there's no adhesive or leveling compound as you're ripping that floor up, which actually means relaying the next floor is massively easier and quicker too. And as I said, it's great when we look at circular economies, as you can see here. And one amazing high-profile job that we were involved in was for the London 2012 Athletes Village dining area, where 20,000 square metres of the adhesive-free product was installed for this temporary installation. After the games, the flooring was uplifted and redistributed to local schools, as you can see on the top right of the screen there. And then the rest of it came back to our manufacturing facility down in Letchworth, where we have the world's only safety floor recycling machine, which is part of the Reclifloor scheme that you see here. So the vinyl gets broken down into chips and then either put back into the manufacturing process or sent off to be recycled by others. And this is not just safety floor, this can be smooth vinyl as well. It's been going since 2009. On average, it recycles 1.3 tonnes a day, but we recycled a whopping 46 tonnes in February this year, which is the equivalent to 4 London double-decker buses. And the collaboration process that Yara and Bryan went through for the heart space meant that what you see on the screen here was avoided. So if an adhered vinyl flooring installation goes wrong, this is likely what it's going to look like on site, causing a costly headache. And I just want you to let you know, I'm here to offer that help and support whenever you need it on any projects, as well as hopefully being able to get out to see people, to see you all, meet you all when restrictions lift. And all being well, the Altro Alton Towers trip will be going ahead this year. We take that from Birmingham, and I'm hoping to look at organising many other events. So if it's something you think your practice would be interested in, just drop me a line. Just want to say thank you, and I'll hand back over to Matt.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Yara. So I'll just finish off and show you some of the completed photos of the project, and then open the floor up to, I guess, to Q&A. So yeah, so we finished this last January, just before the lockdown, actually. So I've only been into it a few times since it was completed, but I hope you kind of agree. We're incredibly proud of the work that we've done here. It's been a kind of labour of love for 10 years of mine and many others in the practice. But you can see here the new accommodation, the new cafe space at the ground floor, the new kind of helical stair that takes you up to the main entrance. This is what became the main entrance. So it's a sort of 3-storey glazed entrance here. You can see at the bottom of the screen, we actually managed to drive a huge hole through that existing building to create that visual connectivity between the street and the new accommodation behind. Here's another image of the outside of the building, and also looking as the stepped floor plates as you go up through the building. So we tried to create as much open collaborative space as we could by stepping the floor plates up through the heart space. It also gives you a really unique perspective of the existing building, the existing engineering details from all the different levels. Here's the students. That's not posed, they were just full. It's really working incredibly well. You know, it's exactly what we wanted to happen, and it's driving a lot more footfall and student and staff collaboration within the heart space. So yeah, we've been lucky enough to win a few awards for this already. We're in for shortlisted this year for the RIBA award, so fingers crossed on that one. And finally, just some last images of the feature staircase with what is the wet lab underneath it, and a kind of showcasing element of all the new laboratories that are in there through the glazing at the bottom. And then, as I said, the new laboratories, IT spaces, and the boardroom, which is at the very top of that block on the right-hand side. There you go, last few slides, almost complete. That's a view looking back towards the main entrance. And obviously none of this could be done, you know, it's nice to, Thomas and I, to talk about Bryan and just us two being here, but this was a massive effort, even beyond the people that are on the screen here. You know, I think pretty much everyone in the business touched this project at one stage or another over 10 years, but they were the main team. And I guess hopefully that's been interesting for you guys. We're really interested in Birmingham. We're interested in hearing from you. You know, we want to work with like-minded people. We want to work with people that share our ethos around sustainability, around residential design and development, as Thomas talked about. And I think, you know, get in touch. I'm sure you'll find our details on LinkedIn pretty easily. Thomas is always in and around Birmingham, so go and have a chat. All right, thank you very much. Over to you, Marina.
Great, well, thank you very much. That was incredible. It's great to see, and it really showcases how early collaboration and sort of discussing these things even with Altro, that one element of the building actually made so much difference. So that's really nice to see. I do have a few questions, but if anyone in the audience has any, feel free to put them in the comment box or Q&A function. So welcome to Birmingham, Bryan. So tell us a bit more about the office. I mean, how do you see the working environment for the Birmingham office to be like, and how big is it going to be? Where are you? A bit more about that would be great.
We've got some fantastic space on Cavendish House on Waterloo Street, so you know, straight off kind of Pigeon Park, fantastic location. But I think what COVID has done, it hasn't kind of changed anything sort of fundamentally about workspace. It's accelerated themes what were already there. So key to our collaborative approach, for example, is creating a diverse range of working environments to cater for sort of specific tasks. And very much the spaces that we've got at Cavendish House enable us to do that, whether it's collaborative spaces, fixed working desks, more kind of breakout and kind of pin-up spaces. In terms of office culture, and I think I can see on the question whether, I'm in the office at the moment, but whether I'd be here on a traditional basis, absolutely. I've been in an architecture studio since I was 18 years old. You know, I've got that very much kind of institutionalized in the way I think. However, I do accept, and we do accept as a business, that, you know, flexible working is a requirement. So I think it's about finding a balance between the two on what works for individuals on a case-by-case basis, but very much a kind of mix between sort of studio and home working is going to be the way forward.
And how you probably already mentioned it, so how big is the office at the moment, and how big, the Birmingham and Bryan in total, actually?
Yeah, well, so there's about 130 odd of us, 135 I think it is now, across 4 offices. Sheffield is still the biggest office because that's where it was set up 32 years ago. So I look after about 70 people up here. I think we've got now up to 7, I think, in the Birmingham office, with a huge drive to grow that office over the next few years. We service some projects out of Sheffield at the moment in terms of the delivery side for Birmingham, but the plan is to grow Birmingham to a scale that we can service and deliver and design everything from that office, and hence why we want to talk to people today about where we're heading down there. We have an office in London that we've got about 20 in, and one in Westerham in Kent, which is about 40, 45. So we've got a north-south split of about the same sort of scale. But yeah, the reason for getting into Birmingham many years ago is we saw the opportunity in what was there. We were already working there, had a number of contacts and clients and collaborators that we were kind of keen on progressing. But I think Thomas being down there now will really kind of kickstart the development of the office even further.
Oh, great. It should be really exciting, and excited to have like people coming back into the city a lot more, and kind of mingling a bit more. We've got, so bringing it back to the HeartSpace building, one of the questions that we've got is, what strategies did you apply to achieve a good level of thermal performance and comfort in the atrium space? And then the second one that I have is, obviously you take it to completion, but what sort of post-occupancy I mean, how important is that? And have you got like a strategy in place of how you're going to measure whether it's actually been achieved, what you set out to do?
Yeah, so part of our work, I think I mentioned, I probably skipped over it a bit quickly actually, but in terms of the work we did with Wagner Bureau, Arabs, our engineers, SDA, was we heavily interrogated the thermal model throughout the process using our BIM model as well. What I probably didn't say is if you look at the roof itself, there's an amount of frit, a percentage of frit on each of those panels. Every one is individually sized. Every panel and amount of frit is individually designed because you have to account for obviously the sun path and then where we've got accommodation sitting under there as well. So that's a big part of it. And then, yeah, we'll be, as part of our circular thinking process, post occupancy evaluation is something that we will be doing. We haven't been able to get back in the building, unfortunately, with post-COVID yet. So that'll be coming up very, very soon. But that's what we try and do across all of our projects, really, to make sure we get back in, walk through with the clients and do both kind of subjective and objective analysis of what's there, whether that's data related stuff, or just go and speak to the staff that are working in there, the students, and make sure they're comfortable with the approach that we did, and then we take those lessons forward, hopefully, into the next project.
Yeah, that's really important, and I think those kind of like the post occupancy thing is kind of not touched on enough as part of the REBA thing personally. But a few more kind of technical questions was kind of, you mentioned and have been recognised for modern methods of construction. Are you finding that the clients that come to you already know this, or that you have to sell this approach? And is that the same with kind of your smarter thinking spaces? Do they come to you because they know that you think in a certain way, or just kind of? Yeah.
I'd say it's a combination of the two. I mean, I had a client with a conversation with a client this morning, and we were talking about 3 infill sites, and they said we want it in MMC, but if MMC is the answer, what is the question? It doesn't always work for every site. So what we tend to offer is we're a big design architect, but that's underpinned by a firm understanding of delivery. So what we undertake is a viability appraisal of, what's the best delivery route for this project? Is it MMC? Is it traditional? Or is it a combination of the two? And there's been many ways of providing that methodology of why we've been recognised for it. So as I mentioned at the beginning, we did get awarded Offsite Architect of the Year last year. That was through a number of work we're doing within MMC. I think what's been really positive for us is we've had the expertise within MMC within the practice for decades, because we've been utilising this as an approach within a lot of our schools projects. So as that intensification and it's become really hot in the residential market, it's just been quite a seamless process to transfer that skill set from one sector to another. So we got recognised for a big school that we did with Midgard down in Westerham, the Broxtowe School, where we managed to massively reduce the delivery programme. We did some work on one of our projects with Berkeley Homes. We undertake the exact appraisal that I spoke about, an assessment of, do we do it traditional, do we do it MMC, or is it a combination of the two? And we managed to reduce Berkeley's offsite target. They had an offsite target of 30%. We managed to exceed that by over 50%. And then we've got a number of key MMC partners who we work with. Premier Modular, we've just been recently appointed as a design partner with Inner Space Homes, who specifically came to us for our expertise within the DFMA process. So yeah, it's something we are getting recognised in, but we don't always see it as a kind of outright solution to a site. We judge it on a case-by-case basis, and I think clients really understand that value we can add.
I think, yeah, Thomas is absolutely right. Part of that vision workshop and that process that we go through, even if MNC is something that they want to move on, there's so many different types of modern methods of construction, whether it's volumetric, panelized, componentized, and each of them have their individual pros and cons that we would then need to review and strategize with them to make sure that's the right solution. So we certainly don't force people down that route, but we do kind of extol the benefits of looking at things like this as a practice. So yeah, I think hopefully we're becoming more and more recognised for it.
Great. No, that's really interesting. And personally, I don't know enough about sort of modern methods of construction, but the more and more those are kind of researched and developed, obviously the better it is for our industry to progress. Definitely.
I think it's fair to say, Maria, as well, that what we found is that where it's viable for projects has been predominantly London and the southeast, but for me, the next place where there's going to be a big intensification of MMC is going to be the West Midlands, and that's reflected by the combined authorities' attitudes to accelerate delivery, particularly on the sites that are within public ownership. So I think really, really exciting going forward.
That's will be interesting to see, and we'll watch this space and look at how your kind of developments in Birmingham progress, because they look very big. Like the Calfoot one looks like quite a big developed one. So you're obviously going to make your mark on the city. There's not any more questions from the sort of attendees, but Sarah and Yara, do feel free to add anything in the conversation that you've learned through the process of working with Bryan, or likewise working with consultants. I do have my own personal questions, but so I suppose one of the questions that I had was, do you select your clients, or is it just people that come to you? And also, you mentioned that the Heart Space was a competition. Is that you setting up? You advised on the competition, is that correct? And it was like an open call, or you just and kind of speak through possibly competitions and how valuable it is to have competitions, and kind of, I guess, was it an open competition?
Yeah, if we touch on the client side, unfortunately, we don't just select who we work with. That would be a fantastic business model.
Sure.
But no, what we try and do, obviously, is through our ethos, what we talked about today, is make sure that we try and align ourselves with clients that have a similar outlook to us. Yeah, maybe one day we can just cherry pick who we work with, but no, we don't. And the competition in that case, the Heart Space, a number of ones we get involved in, that was a kind of, a limited invited competition by the university. So we were lucky enough to get on the short list of, I can't remember how many it was now, maybe 6 or 7. And then the process was almost like a 2 to 3 week design comp, which we were lucky enough to win. But we do go for a lot of design competitions. When we're doing one now at another university, which we've been in for about 6 months. So yeah, we like to kind of test our mettle against some of the bigger names in the industry, and we are kind of consistently getting up there and winning these competitions. So we're a big part of what we're doing is trying to kind of innovate in whatever sectors that we're in, and design competitions do give you that ability to do something that's innovative generally.
Do you have like a group in Bryan that focus on the bids and the competition, or is it kind of just when opportunities arise that will be shared in the offices?
Yeah, it's a bit of a mix really. So people like Thomas and myself who sit at the front end of design, we kind of see the opportunities coming forward. So we have a meeting each week to review kind of bids, opportunities, competitions. And then we select teams nationwide. We're a kind of one Bryan. We don't look at individual offices or silos. We look at who are the best people to work on whatever project and whatever competition. So it's part of that kind of resourcing process and that debate in who's going to be the best, fit, the best athlete for the project. And that really then sets us off going then. And then we start a similar, design concept and visioning process as we do with our clients internally as part of the design process as well.
I think as well, it's sort of fair to say a lot of the kind of bids and sort of competitions we're involved in, whether it's an outright competition or a kind of OJU bid story, it's about getting that balance right, because at the end of the day, it's not always, or the end result might not always be a building. It's more about demonstrating a process or telling a story, and getting that narrative is absolutely pivotal and becoming more and more important to clients. So that balance is key, definitely.
Absolutely. I think there's one thing, when you leave university, for whatever reason, I don't know why, you can get to practice. Sometimes what you've learned about creating a narrative and a concept kind of goes away, and it's something that we push very hard to retain. And like I said earlier about the sketches and model making, is try and get people to get back to what they started and why they loved the process in the beginning, rather than kind of jumping straight into CAD and modeling something up, because you kind of lose that intuitive aspect of concept design. So yeah, it's something that we're really passionate about.
The only thing I would add, Marina, is you asked if we wanted to add anything. From the Bryan's point of view, we never just get told to write an MBS specification for a corridor or for a lab. They share their vision with us. So we're actually able to really advise them on what would work best. And they do tend to listen. It is a collaborative approach right from the very start, not just myself, but I think they do that with other manufacturers. Everyone that has an element in the building is involved with the vision, not just the technical side.
Absolutely. Try and leave your ego at the door, as we always say, and collaborate with everyone in the business. That's the main thing.
Yeah, I think we've got 2 more questions on there.
Yeah, we do. Phil says this is a boring question. I don't think it's towards Bryan, but it might also apply to Altro. What quality control procedures do you use?
Quality control was in QA.
Yeah, I guess from as a project is progressing, or
UMS was put.
Sorry.
quality control procedures, QMS. I'll Google what that means.
Yeah, I'm not sure what that means. We have a QA, we have lots of QA procedures and ISO accreditation things that we have to follow. We use our kind of design review process and project review processes to ensure we're kind of hitting all the right KPIs internally as a business. But yeah, I don't think we kind of set those, but it's more informal stuff that we talk about in design reviews all the time to make sure we're hitting the right notes.
Yeah, I mean, it's everything from kind of technical reviews at kind of key points and key milestones within work stages. So we get specialists in who haven't been involved in the project to look at it with sort of fresh eyes. But that's also got to be aligned with, getting the client's requirements right. Like, is the mix right? Does it align with local planning policy? And, all the things what are really important to us in terms of our collaboration and design quality. You've got to hit those as a minimum for it to open up those kind of opportunities and stuff. So those kind of procedures are absolutely vital in any practice.
Yeah, the other part of what's important in QA at the moment is we've kind of aligned all of our QA procedures to the RIBA 2030 climate challenge approach, because we need to be hitting that, and we'd like to be hitting that quicker than 2030 really. So we've kind of rejigged all of our QA procedures. We have a team internally that just look at that and are finding ways to make everything that we do more efficient and more sustainable.
You probably already mentioned it. Oh, sorry.
I was just going to say, from Altro's point of view, we are ISO 9001 and ISO 14001, and we've got a lot of information on raw materials and everything like that, sourcing raw materials, etc., on the website. So I can send info through if that question was sort of steered towards us at all. Okay, sorry, Marina.
No, that's fine. I was just going to add, you probably mentioned it. Is it? I guess it's a BIM project. What level was it to? Was it a BIM project?
Yeah, Heartspace.
Yeah, Heartspace. And is it sort of BIM level 2? And how did you find that sort of collaboration? And
well, I think I mentioned it in the presentation tonight. When we did the project back in 2013, 2014, when it began, it wasn't a traditional thing to do BIM level 2. It's just in its infancy. But we've been working in BIM, proper BIM, information management, for about 15 years at that stage, because our guy who heads up our digital team, Rob Jackson, probably one of the top 5 in the UK in terms of his knowledge of what goes on in BIM. He's got an award named after him actually at BIM Share Live, so he definitely knows his stuff. He's been kind of pushing us beyond, I guess, the typical arc of where an architect would be. So we approached it in a BIM level 2 methodology, and we approach every project in exactly the same methodology, whether it's a requirement or not. And we decided that and invested in that process about 10 years ago, I think, as a business, just to say, right, we need to learn to do this. We've got to do it better. We want to be at the forefront of innovation in the digital sector, which we still are. So it was just an investment in time, resources and people to make sure whenever we start a project now, it started with the same template, the same BIM level 2 methodology. We don't always take it through to full COBE data or full data analysis, depending what the client wants. But you could pretty much look at any model in our office and it would be set up in exactly the same way.
Brilliant. We've got one more question, and then it's nearly 2 o'clock. So Victoria's asked, can you tell us a bit more about the Bryan digital brand and how the business works with the architectural practice?
Yeah, so as I've just mentioned then, so Rob, who heads it up, Rob was an architect who worked at Bryan. I think he's been here longer than me actually, maybe 20 years. Started off doing architecture, realised whilst doing it probably back in 2006, 2007, that he was really interested in the 3D modelling and the data side of what you could do with modelling. So he started to develop a real interest in BIM before it was even BIM, before it was even a thing, and got us all in the office modelling and putting data into door sets and scheduling things out and all that kind of stuff. And so back in, I think it was 2015, we set digital up as a separate sub-brand to Bryan. So they still sit under Bryan. But Rob's stuff now, he works directly with other architects, with other consultants, with main contractors on projects that we are not working on as architects as well. huge, Ministry of Defence, Ministry of Justice project. So it's like a separate strand to the business, but also the lessons learned and things that he's doing, which are real blue sky stuff in BIM, we then feed back through our processes internally as well. So we have our technical information manager, Rosie, does that process for us. So you kind of create that, collaboration between the real blue sky stuff and the day-to-day delivery of what needs to be done on the project. So it works pretty well, we think. We still think we're kind of at the forefront of innovation in that part of the sector for sure. And it's Rob's team are growing all the time. That need for information management and data management is becoming more and more. So we've been investing in that side of the business now for the last few years.
Great. Well, thank you very much for all your time, Sarah, Yara, Tomasz and Matt. As mentioned before, Sarah is obviously and Altro is our sponsor, but if you ever need any kind of flooring advice at all, find her on LinkedIn, and we'll be seeing more of Bryan, I guess, as we start moving back into the city. But if there's any questions that you had that weren't answered, feel free to fire them over and we can email them back. But yeah, thank you very much for all your time, and it's been really interesting to hear about the development of Heartspace and how you guys work in general.
Thanks, Marina.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure. Thanks.
Thank you, everyone.
Cheers.